Hello and welcome everyone, this is Calebovitsch coming to you with another episode of Deck Check. Today I am going to show you a deck, a control deck in the Expedition format. Yes, there are a lot of decks for Throne, now there's going to be one for Expedition. This is going to be a control deck, a very heavy control deck that I had played in the last days of the January 2020 season. In the last 2 days, yes, it was the 30th and the 31st, I attained a 17 win, 2 loss result that allowed me to get from the fringes of top 100 up to top 20. I believe I ended up around the 17th spot. So yes, this is going to be a control deck, a very heavy 4-color control deck with everything that you might want. And yes, if you think there's going to be a good card there probably are. So sit back and enjoy the ride. As for the name of this deck, this is, when I was making it, I put all good non-shadow cards into this deck. And I said that I'm drunk with power. Then I made a spelling error and inserted a J after drunk, and it said Caleb Drunkj with power, and someone said, maybe it should stay that way, and so it has stayed that way. So this is Caleb Drunkj with power, and while playing this deck you usually will have a ton of power, especially later in the game. This is a 4-color control deck that is honestly a mix and match of 2 other control decks you might have seen earlier. One is the Fire Time Justice deck around Zelta Arcanum. The other one being a Time Justice Primal deck around curses and curse-giving units, proccing units such as Forbidden Rider Outcast and Archgriffin Patriarch. This deck also has 7 board sweeps in Shinra's Peaks and Age-Worn Vestige, and a lot of single point removal, but let's not get ahead of ourselves here. So yeah, you might have seen either the cast from the January ECQ and the week after the Winter Championship, the Winter Championships in the Expedition formats, and in both of these there were a ton of Argenport decks, value decks, etc., etc. There were also some more aggressive decks like Yetis, so in the first of those tournaments, an Argenport deck won, and I was playing a very similar deck to that one. And the goal of that one was to kind of outvalue other mid-range decks, stay alive against aggressive decks, and come back in a huge way with Carvets and Dizzo's Office, those being the life gain mechanics of that deck. Then the week after, one would say that the Argenport deck that won that tournament was one that tried to go... You can either go over or go under, so out-control or out-aggro something in a mirror match, or if you're trying to build again a deck against a certain deck or a meta game. So this is the embodiment of going over, because it is a very heavy control deck. You probably have seen such decks already, but this one has proven very reliable for me, at least. It does have horrendous influence requirements. It requires triple Justice for Age-Worn Vestige, triple Primal for the Market Clutch of Talents, double Time for Shinra's Peaks, and a single Fire for Zelta Arcanum and some other cool stuff. Yeah, I mean, I did not have a ton of problems when it comes to the influence requirements of cards I'm casting in this deck. This deck is running 16 seats, which are double influence givers for you, and 9 sigils, and also 7 ways of searching for those sigils, with 4 copies of Seek Power, and 3 copies of Amber Acolyte, a 3-cost 2-1-time Explorer that on summon also draws you a sigil of your choice from your deck. While playing this deck, if you're getting to the later stages of the game, you gotta remember if you have any basic sigils left in your deck from those effects, from just drawing cards, etc., etc. Because if you play a Seek Power and it turns out you're not getting anything, that's just a waste of a card that could have gone, for example, to the market with Rime Conclave Smuggler. Also, once again, this deck is a heavy control deck, which means the games last rather long, so it is not a deck I would suggest if you want to go fast through the ladder. Then I would just suggest a rather aggressive deck such as, I don't know, Onis or Cambrai or Elysian, something like that, or Stonescar. But if you want to have a rather high win percentage, this is actually, I'm not sure if it's tier 1, maybe tier 1.5, maybe tier 2, but once again, maybe the variance was favoring me in those last days of the season. But yeah, some of those games, many of those games were rather great. So yes, how to say it? Okay. When it comes to how this deck wins, there are several options. One of them is going mid-range on your opponent, and that could happen with your Forbidden Rider Outcasts. These are 3/3 Huru Flyers that on summon either play a -3 attack curse on an uncursed enemy unit, or if the enemy has no units that are not cursed. Did I say that correctly? If they have no units that are not cursed, yes, probably. You get to play a Curse of Loneliness on the enemy player instead, and that Curse of Loneliness plays a huge role, especially in the mirror matches, as you're going to see later in this video. It is a curse that you play on the opponent that says at the end of the cursed player's turn, if they didn't play a unit, deal 1 damage to them, and you gain 1 armor. And you do have a relic weapon, or rather 3 copies of a relic weapon in this deck, so that additional armor proves useful, and just the inevitability of the opponent receiving damage turn in, turn out is also something you really need. Also, this is a multi-faction curse that stays on your opponent, which means if you play your Archgriffin Patriarch, the 5-cost double Huru Flyer with Endurance, so a Steel Legion, but a Griffin, not a Valkyrie, that on summon you get to draw a card for each curse on the enemy player and their units. So this Curse of Loneliness, is something that usually stays on the opponent because they can't get rid of it with Cast into Shadow. So usually the ways of dealing with that are Cleansing Rain that people are running from time to time in the market, or if someone is running a Kirin Ascendant or a Draconic Ire or well, probably boards are not played that much. What is the next one? Unmake. I mean, there are some singular ones, but this is also not a curse-heavy deck. This is not a deck that relies only on curses that you're playing on the opponent to win. They are helping you by cursing the opponent, obviously, but this is not the be-all, end-all of the win condition of this deck. So you're not that afraid of Cleansing Rain killing all curses. You're slightly more afraid of Cleansing Rain giving Aegis to the opposing side of the board, but, well, that's about it. But there are things you can do against that, so at least that. I've talked about most of the units here, and once again, Forbidden Rider Outcasts are really most of the glue that sticks this deck together, as they say, because it is a tempo play rather early in the game, because turn 4, yeah, it's still early, especially if you're playing a control deck. So you're playing a 3/3 flyer that can block some stuff, and you're disabling one of your opponent's units in a way or another. So that is a rather good thing to play on turn 3. I mean, play a unit and shut down an enemy unit. This is almost like a removal, so there is that. Archgriffin Patriarch is also a great unit, and both of these, or rather neither of these, die to Cast into Shadow, so you could also be happy about that. Also, you just don't have to play everything out at once. Anyway, so you're starting the game off with just solidifying your power, playing some Seek powers, playing maybe Amber Acolyte in turn 3, just to have all the influence that you need. And early in the game, you either need, depending on what you have in hand, you usually need a double green, double justice for Forbidden Rider Outcast and for the justice half of Shenra Speaks, but you also need double primal for Wisdom of the Elders, a card draw thingy, engine, I would call it, the other one being Archgriffin Patriarch. Usually the first two to get up are Justice and Primal, depending on what you're holding in your hand. Next comes double time, so we can play Shenra Speaks and kill all the units. And the single red is not really necessary early in the game, so if you don't have red in your opening hand, even if you're holding up a Zelta Arcanum, it is not necessary for you to get a fire influence then and there, because you will get it sooner or later. You have a ton of red sources. You have seven cards that seek your sigil. With the sigil, that's 8. You have 3 seats of impulse and 2 seats of glory. That is 5 additional sources. So we have 13 fire sources for 8 cards that require only a shingle fire. Okay, so this is going to be slightly more chaotic than usual, as you might have noticed. As far as the units go, the rest of the 3-drops, I mean, I've already talked about both the Griffin cards. Amber Acolytes are just there to block some ground units, just buy you some time, and buy you a sigil. I mean, if you're playing an Amber Acolyte, you're getting the sigil if the opponent has to remove an Amber Acolyte, because, for example, they're also playing a control deck and this can just attack them for 2 each turn. Sorry, that's an old MTG habit, like virtually tapping cards. So this is still card advantage for you. There are 2 copies of Scorpion Wasp in this deck as well. The 3-cost Flying Deadly Ambush Scorpion 1/1. These are additional sources of removal, not for all units. For example, this one just dies to quick draw units such as Eclipse Dragon, but it is rather useful in a lot of situations, because if the opponent is attacking you and you're playing a Scorpion Wasp, you have the window to block a unit before the opponent has a window to remove your Scorpion Wasp. So if you're blocking a unit without Overwhelm, the unit is considered blocked, and even if Scorpion Wasp dies, you're not receiving any damage from it that combat. Rounding out the units, we have 4 copies of Rhyme Conclave Smuggler. So for a control deck, this is not really a unitless deck. You have 17 units here, and those Griffins really are what kills the enemy more often than not. Anyway, you have 4 copies of Rhyme Conclave Smuggler, the Huru Smuggler 3/2, that on Onslaught you and this unit each get Aegis, and you having Aegis is great both against some kind of burn that the opponent could have, or for curses, because remember, if the opponent plays a cursed relic on you and you have face Aegis, that relic just goes to their void. And obviously you get to swap a card in your hand from your hand with a card in the market, and I'm gonna get to the market later in the deck explanation. Now, for a control deck, there are three main things. One of them I've already talked about, and that is playing a power each turn. You need to play a power card almost each turn in a control deck to have an easy game and be able to win. Well, there are flaws sometimes, obviously, but more often than not, if you are playing a land each turn, you're gonna win. So yeah, but I've already talked about it. We have 25 power cards for Seek Power and 3 Amber Acolytes, so that is 32 power sources. So that is 1/3 of what you need for a control deck to win. Another thing is removal, and we have a ton of removal in this deck. And given that the curve that you see here is heavy on 1s, and there are almost no 2-drops in this deck, that means the 1-drops are the 1-cost cards are Seek Powers, 4 copies of Defiance, a fast justice spell for 1 that kills an attacking enemy unit with cost 2 or less, or stuns an attacking enemy unit with cost 3 or more. Remember, if the opposing unit has endurance, if it costs 0, 1, or 2, you kill it. If it costs 3 or more, you cannot target it. For example, to take Aegis off of it. So we have those Defiances, and we have 4 copies of Permafrost, a 1-cost primal spell that says stun the cursed unit for as long as it is cursed. And for both of those things, there is, well, the problem is there is a lot of endurance units being played and a lot of ways for the opponent to get rid of a Permafrost. But these are here mainly to slow the opponent down. I mean, even if you're playing against an Elysian deck and the first thing they grab from their market on turn 3 with the Smuggler is Infinite Hourglass, then your Permafrost still slows them down on turn 1 or 2. So they cannot attack you with their Lookout or with their whatever they have for a 2-drop. And it gets you closer and closer to that Shenra's Peaks that you need. So these are the cheap pieces of removal. On 2 and 3 we have Scorpion Wasps, but we also have 2 copies of Kairos Choice, a 2-cost Praxis fast spell that either deals 3 damage to an enemy unit or you get to put one of your units back into your hand. And we have 3 copies of Display of Instinct, and we can be playing those Kairos Choices and Displays of Instinct because we are splashing red to this Time Justice Primal. Maybe not full curse control deck, but a control deck nonetheless. This is a very modal fast spell that costs 3 and has the Fire, Time, and Primal Influence requirements that says either deal 4 damage to an enemy, and it could be the enemy player, the enemy unit, or an enemy site. And this one, taking out sites such as Dizzo's Office, is a huge boon to you. Or you get to put one of your units into your hand and gain its health as your health. Or you get to negate an enemy spell. And honestly, this is one of the MVPs in this deck as far as I've played it. The option of negating an enemy spell in Expedition has not been that wide. I'm not counting Daring Griffin, obviously. Because Daring Griffins had been a plague in Elysian decks and Huru decks in this format for a while now, but a spell version of a negate. So yeah, you have those displays, and they are, both the first and the third mode are great. The option to put one of your units back into your hand with Kairos Choice or Display of Instinct is also rather good because A, you can redraw a Sigil if you really need it. You can redraw a card from your market, you can replay a curse on the opponent, or you can just draw 2 or 3 more cards with Patriarch. We also, when it comes to removal, have 2 copies of Avigraft. You have no ways of searching for this Avigraft in this deck. I am not playing any Parol's choices in here because they are really not necessary, in my opinion. This is not a full curse control deck, this is just a control deck that utilizes some curses. This is a 4-cost Double Justice Cursed Relic that you play on the opponent that says on summon you get to kill an enemy unit without flying, and the cursed player can't play units with that name, but on Entomb they get to play a 3/3 Valkyrie. We're not using 4 copies of it, and it comes into play more often than not. But this is not the end of the removal suite. Oh no, not yet. We have 4 copies of Shenra's Peaks, the 5-cost double Combri spell that kills all units, or you have also the option to decimate and silence and kill all units instead. And usually you need to play this on turn 5 against aggressive and mid-range decks to win, but it is not always necessary. It depends on the board state. But also, you have 3 copies of Age-Worn Vestige, not 4 because I don't believe 4 copies are really necessary, although this is a rather good control element for this deck. It is a 6-cost triple Justice Relic Weapon, a 3/9 at that on Spellcraft 3, which means if you play additional 3 power, so 6 plus 3 is 9, you get to play a Harsh Rule. That kills all units, so you have a ton of mass removals here. So I've already talked about leg 1 and leg 2 of the 3-legged principles of the control deck, because if you have power each turn, if you have removal, and if you have the third leg card draw, then you're gonna find a way to kill the enemy, for sure, even if they just are done with it and they concede because they see no reason to play that game at all. So for card advantage, the third leg of this, we have 4 copies of Wisdom of the Elders, the usual 3-cost double primal fast spell that draws you 2 cards. We also have those Art Griffin Patriarchs, and this is something rather difficult. to assess whether to play Patriarch or not, because sometimes you just want to play it on turn 5 to have a Steel Legion, a 4/4 flyer with endurance. If you are redrawing one card because you played a Permafrost on the opposing unit or Fro put one of their curses on someone, then you're really happy. If you're drawing 2 or 3 cards with Heartgriffin Patriarch, that is just amazing. But yeah, this is not here for the blowout and having too many cards in your hand and needing to discard them. This is just for you to have a cantrip or a double cantrip, so for you to draw 1 or 2 cards and then you're happy. But also, another form of card advantage lies here in these sites. 3 copies of Zoltar Arcanum, the 7 cost Fire Time Justice site that says when you attack with one or more of your units, you get to play a random power card from your deck. And that means if that card is a sigil, you get it into play ready, not depleted. And if that is a seat, then if you have a sigil in your hand, it also comes into play ready. So yeah, it also kind of ramps you up to that, I don't know, playing a million cards or just that Age-worn Vestige, but that is just the first mode. So Zoltar Arcanum plays 3 spells. If you want to defend yourself, and this is usually the first spell you're playing, you have Zoltar Convoy, a 4 cost that plays 2/2 exiles with Aegis and Endurance, and you have to remember that those Zoltan units are actually 3 cost, which means they cannot be gotten rid of, or rather targeted, with Defiance. That is something you might need to know from time to time at least. Next up, we have the card advantage, Vital Arcana. You get to draw 2 cards, and you get to gain 2 health, which is great. But there's also Harmony of Flame, an underutilized spell that gives you +1 power this turn for each of your units. Also, you get to reduce the cost of each spell in your deck by 1. So, if you're playing Zoltar Arcanum and you're playing Zoltar Convoy, then on the following turn, if you play Harmony of Flame, you have at least 9 power, given that the Zoltan Convoys live. And excuse me, and you can play Age-worn Vestige with Spellcraft to harsh rule the board and attack the enemy face. So there is that. And later on, you get to play Bren Archmagister, who is a 5/5 unit, and that is usually enough. But also, when you play another card, you get +1 power this turn, so you have like a very high, insanely high amount of power. So yes, this deck is all about being able to play a power card each turn for you to maybe not ramp up, but be able to play your more expensive cards, because as you can see, there is just a ton of very expensive cards in this deck. Once again, this deck wants to go outvalue other decks. You get to draw more cards than the opponent, hopefully, because of Wisdom of the Elders, Patriarch, and Zoltar Arcanum. But also, you have a ton of removal for whatever the opponent plays. Now, let's get back to Rime Conclave Smuggler and the market here. So the composition of the market has changed over time, but I believe this is the composition that I have played in those 19 games I've told you about. So for sure, we gotta have Edict of Korosh here, because Shadow is still an overplayed color. This is a 2-cost spell that silences a unit. Then, if it's red or shadow, kill it. And this is your best answer, really your best answer to Tazbu, the 5-cost quintuple Shadow Radiant that draws a ton of cards for our Argenport decks. Next up, we have a Display of Honor. I had been playing a couple of those main deck in one of the first iterations of this deck, but then I moved 1 copy to the market. There's a 3-cost Ixten display, fast spell, that has 3 modes. Either give one of your units +4/+4 and life steal this turn, which helps against aggressive decks, or you get to draw 2 weapons from your void, or you get to transform an enemy unit into a 2/1 goat, which just shuts down a unit. So it's a pseudo removal for a very aggressive unit like a Kairos or something like that. And remember, you do have weapons in this deck. You have your Age-worn Vestiges, and you might have already seen one of my Eternal Highlight videos in which I played Display of Honor and got 2 Age-worn Vestiges back from my void and the opponent just conceded. Spoiler alert, or not. Next up, we have Cleansing Grain. It is a 4-cost double justice fast spell that says you and your units get Aegis, but also you have the option to decimate and kill all enemy curses. And, well, this is honestly not only against a cursed deck. This is also a good card against control decks because it has the option of giving your units Aegis as a fast spell. And being able to interact with what the opponent plays on fast speed is quite important, because if someone else wants to play a Shinra Speaks, you have the option to negate it, or you have the option of get something back in your hand, or you get the option of just giving your units Aegis and attacking them anyway. And if you happen to catch an Avigraft or two, then it's for the best. Next up, we have Clutch of Talons. Yes, guys, we have Clutch of Talons in here. And this is the finisher of choice, especially against decks that are not running Shinra Speaks or Age-worn Vestiges. This is a 4-cost triple primal weapon, just a regular weapon, that gives a unit +2/+2 and flying, and also has the option to amplify 2, and play for each amplify, play a 5/5 dragon with flying. So for each 2 that you overpay the initial cost of 4, you get to play a huge dragon. Interested? I for sure am. Usually you get to play it on an Aegis up Rime Conclave Smuggler, turning it into a 5/4 flyer with Aegis, and you get to summon 2, 3, or 11 dragons. Who knows? Also, remember, when you're playing Zalta Arcanum, when you're attacking with your units, you get to play a ton of power from your deck. Then later, on the turn that you're playing Harmony of Flame, that is your best turn, usually, to play Clutch of Talons, because you're just gaining additional power. Also remember that there is a limit to how many units you can have in play. Last, but certainly not least, and this is a very interesting addition to this deck, especially that the Onslaught is rather difficult to trigger, we have Sodi Wingbreaker, the 5-cost double primal 3/6 elemental shaman, that says at the end of your turn, if the enemy player took damage, draw a card, but also Onslaught deals 6 damage to an enemy unit with flying or an enemy site. Now, this is a rather interesting interaction when you're playing a control deck against a control deck, because usually you have a side, the opponent has a side, and for example, you have a relic weapon or they have a relic weapon, and relic weapons cannot really interact with sides. Well, now they can, because if you're attacking with your relic weapon, that triggers Onslaught. So there were a couple of plays, a couple of games in which I attacked the opponent then with Age-worn Vestige, played a Smuggler, played Sodi Wingbreaker, killed their sides. Also, I dealt damage to the opponent's face with Age-worn Vestige, so also Sodi Wingbreaker drew me a card at the end of the turn. So yeah, I mean, in the market you could also, instead of Sodi or instead of one of the other cards, you could also have another finisher, but I believe that Clutch of Talons is really one of the best finishers you could have. I mean, you do need a unit, but you are playing the Smuggler to get the Clutch of Talons, so you can almost always play it. You have Sodi Wingbreaker, that draws you a lot of cards and can draw you into your Griffins. And you have a Display of Honor that can give you back those Age-worn Vestiges that you already played. So yeah, there is actually a ton of ways to win with this deck. Is it any good? Well, yeah, I started the video with saying that, for me at least, lately it has been rather good. In fact, it was so good that during the whole 19 games, I came across 2 decks that I think were literally copy-pasted versions of this. Anyway, I'm going to show you 3 games. They will be rather long, and afterwards I'm going to just do some finishing thoughts. So stay tuned and watch the games. This is the first game of 3 that I had played on the 30th of January on my stream. The first hand only had 2 power. This hand has 2 copies of Shinra Speaks that we cannot play yet because we don't have a second time, but we do have a lot of influence. And if the opponent is playing an aggressive deck, we also have a Defiance. Now I just took a look through the market to see what to get with Rime Conclave Smuggler. And the opponent is playing a slow version of the Argentport deck, probably the controlling one, but we're not in a hurry anywhere. Yisha the Equalizer means that's probably a different version of the deck than I initially thought. So once again, I'm thinking of what to get from the market. I mean, whether to play the Smuggler on turn 3 or not. And also in this deck, you usually do not need to play the Smuggler on turn 3. And that is also what I opted for. I mean, for sure, I would love to play Shinra Speaks rather sooner than later. And one of those Defiances can take care of Icaria. Age-worn Vestige. Okay, we need to draw a time source because we're missing second time and also 1 power. It's probably going to be depleted when we get it, but we are not in a hurry. The opponent is down to 2 cards in hand. We are killing Icaria. We can either Defiance the 5/5 now to buy some time, or we can just let it hit us. Defiance buys us 2 turns, and well, yeah. Once again, I'm just looking whether to get something or not. I'm thinking about Edict of Korosh, probably, because the opponent is also playing Shadow. But they seem to be on a rather Justice version of that deck, not the full Tazbu version of the deck. They played Incarnus as a 3/3, which is not a huge problem. And right now I opted not to take the 5 damage. And the opponent also plays a Lethrai Provocateur. Okay. There is another Justice Sigil here. In Lethrai Provocateur, when it infiltrates us, it discards all weapons from our deck. And we still have some copies of Age-worn Vestiges there. So right now I'm thinking of what to do, whether to just play my Age-worn Vestige and hit their Incarnus. I still can't play either of the Shinra Speaks. Or I could go for Rime Conclave Smuggler, get rid of one of those Shinra Speaks. We can get it back later because it is green, so we can get it with the with a Smuggler. But I wanted to get rid of that 5/5 deadly unit because I would like my Age-worn Vestiges. Thank you very much. Opponent is playing an Avigraft on our Smuggler, and right now we have no answer to this Avigraft, and we have no access to the market anymore. Opponent... what is the opponent doing here, and what are we doing here for sure? That is another question. If I play an Age-worn Vestige, I could kill the 3/3 Incarnus, and then still have a 3/6 Relic Weapon, which means we are going to have a 3/1 Relic Weapon after Yisha hits us. And then if we play Forbidden Rider Outcast under 5/5, we can block the 5/5 with the 2/5 with the 3/3, but we draw a non-depleted power source, which means we can play our Arcanum and protect it with Zolta Convoy. Opponent has top decked a Smuggler, which means we're in a world of hurt and probably something rather expensive. I'm opting to block here, obviously. And also, on the next turn, if I attack with Zolta Convoy, I could draw into a time source, but fortunately I drew my second time source. I'm thinking of whether to play one or the other now, but I think I opted to play Vital Arcane to draw 2 cards. And we have yet another throw here. And I think I want to attack with Zolta Convoy to get a power. If the opponent blocks with their 2/2, then everything's fine, everything's good. And us getting that power is usually better than not. And the opponent's not blocking here. I also opted to just Shinra Speaks now and attack the opponent's face with this as well. Now, the biggest hurdle would be if the opponent had summoned a Vara, but fortunately they went for Dizzo's Office. Well, fortunately or unfortunately. And we drew an Archgriffin Patriarch, which is going to be rather fine here. Okay, so we are attacking for 3 once again. We are playing a Curse of Loneliness and a second Curse of Loneliness on the opponent. So that we can have at least one flyer when the opponent kills one of our units with Cut Ties now. But also this is the rather greedy play, because usually the opponent only played 1 Smuggler so far. They went for the Office, which means they don't have Cleansing Grain in hand yet. And having those two curses there means that Archgriffin Patriarch is going to draw us 2 cards. Also, we are getting a ton of power here, really. And this is really some good fuel here. So we can draw 2 more cards here, and we can draw 2 more cards here. And we can play that Seek power. We can grab another power. We can kill their site. We can permafreeze their unit. We can do everything. The only thing we cannot do is we cannot attack the opponent with Age-worn Vestige because they still have a unit, even if it's exhausted. In this case, permafrozen. Cast into Shadow on the curse. Cast into Shadow on Bren. And they are attacking face. Sure. No matter. And they are taking 2 damage. We are gaining 2 health. 2 armor because we have 2 Curses of Loneliness on them. We are attacking with the Griffin, which means we are getting a power from our deck into play, which means there is a lower probability of us drawing another power. Scorpion Wasp here is a piece of removal, as it should be. Curses of Loneliness don't work now. Don't work yet. I should have played Seek Power first. This is a small mistake because I'm almost out of power in the deck. Almost out of sigils in the deck, even. And given that I have no smugglers, I might as well play that power, especially that the opponent knew what I had. Now, this is a slightly bigger problem because their weapon, their Age-worn Vestige, is turned from a 3/9 into a 9/9 because they have their Yisha, but they are still taking 2 damage off of the Curse of Loneliness because that is a fist, but that is not a whole unit. Okay, we can Shinra Speaks their small unit, and when they attack us, I mean we are at 9, but when they attack us with Fisticuffs, we can block with Scorpion Was Up and deal 1 damage to them, and if they don't have another unit, there is a second Curse of Loneliness, and there are 2 Curses of Loneliness on them, and yes, they are taking 2 damage, and in that way, we have gotten rid of the Age-worn Vestige. Now, we can usually see in these situations what the opponent top decks, and this is the inevitability of Curses of Loneliness. This game also highlights why there are still Scorpion Wasps in this deck. I mean, in one of the early builds I had 3 or even 4 of them, but gradually I cut them down, introduced some Kairos' Choices and some more Displays of Instincts in here. Now, sure, the opponent played a unit, but we can draw more cards off of that Arcanum. That's another Age-worn Vestige, so for example we can permafreeze their flyer, attack with 2 ground units, get the opponent down from 5 to 3, then play Age-worn Vestige as a 3/15 relic weapon, kill all units, and attack the opponent for the remaining 3. And from this block we also could have seen that the opponent does not have any stops. So probably they cannot do much about it. And boom goes the dynamite. Okay, on to game 2. Welcome to game number 2. 2 power? Not enough. We can do better. Also, don't worry guys, if you need to go down to 6 cards in this deck, this one has so many sources of card advantage, you don't need to keep a bad 7. You can stay with a rather good 6 even. And here we have 2 Primal and 1 of everything else. We have a Wisdom of the Elders or a Scorpion Wasp. We have a Smuggler if we need something from the market as well. And we have a Shinra Speak, so we only need another Time and another Justice. And the opponent is in a rather slow start in an Elysian deck. Sure, that's Permafrost. But if we just cast Wisdom of the Elders on turn 3, we are really, really happy here. Now, the thing is what to do, and Nash is so nasty that I opted to just kill it then and there, because the opponent could be playing a Daring Griffin, and then we just cannot do anything about it. And that's an emblem, and that's a Daring Griffin. And we can remove such a Daring Griffin by just playing Wisdom of the Elders. They have to negate it, they don't have any other unit to play a weapon on, so yeah. Another piece of removal. I mean, I would love to draw 2 cards, but getting rid of a Daring Griffin is also a nice option. Okay, Seek Power means we are getting a time, because we have more green sources than time sources in this deck to play Shinra Speaks. That is why I opted to do this. And also here we have an option of playing either Scorpion Wasp or Wisdom of the Elders, and you're going to see an interesting thing once again why Scorpion Wasp is sometimes a good card. Because right now the opponent played a Daring Griffin and attacked with Nash, they have no power left. And here we can once again kill Daring Griffin. We could have killed Nash with that Scorpion Wasp, and once again we can kill Daring Griffin with just playing a spell when the opponent has no other units. Now, for sure, we are lacking some things here, but yeah, we are rather even when it comes to us versus the opponent. Now, what we could go for here is get rid of Permafrost. You usually don't need Permafrost against this deck. It's a rather bad choice, especially if they have a Smuggler and they went for that Infinite Hourglass. So I went for Sodi Windbreaker because when I'm losing against an Elysian deck, it usually means they have some good flyers or just some good units. And they're making one of these cards cost much more. Probably Shinra Speaks. I mean, it's the one with the highest impact here. Fortunately, I drew a second green. As I said, more green sources than time sources in this deck from what I remember. And we're getting rid of that friggin' Alban Raw. I hate that guy. When I'm playing against him, obviously. And next turn we can attack. We can play Sodi Windbreaker and we can play Sodi Windbreaker and get rid of that 4/1 flyer. And probably also draw a card if they're not blocking. Equivocate on our 3/2. Which gives us Dune Phantom. Yes, opponent, thank you. Thank you, that is going to be a rather good defender against you. Alrighty. Archgriffin Patriarch. I mean, there is already a curse on the opponent, and I can play Scorpion Wasp and Dune Phantom, so it's a question whether I do play that Scorpion Wasp and not allow the opponent to draw a card. Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. I could have also played Dune Phantasm, but that is going to be a play for later on if the opponent has any ground attackers. Temple Shihan, sure, and an Ice Elemental, and a nice Elemental. The opponent has a curse on them that is called Avigraft. So I am redrawing a card. Well, that is a depleted power and a delayed power source that we cannot play yet. And that is another Sodi Spell Shaper on our Archgriffin Patriarch that turns it into a very, very interesting premium unit that is called Rost, the Walking Glacier. Thank you, opponent, for the roast. Borderlands Lookout is a problem here as well. Now we do have a Defiance. We do have Dune Phantasm. So what I'm actually going for here is getting a third Justice for that Age-worn Vestige. We are playing a power. We are sending it back to the opponent because we're going to defy the 1-cost 4/5 flyer. We're going to play Dune Phantasm and block their 4/2. And we're just taking 3 damage. And on the following turn we can do either Sodi, or we could do Rost, or we could, if we draw power, or even we can even go Age-worn Vestige and start killing off the opponent's units. All depends on what they do now. Flying Exalted is a problem. Trailmaker is a slight problem. I mean, the opponent having cards is a problem. But I think right now, if I play Seat of Order and Age-worn Vestige, kill their 4/2 because it has Aegis, and sooner or later we're gonna be able to play that Shinra Speaks. The weapon still, the relic weapon still has 5 armor. So if we block the 3/3 and wait, never mind. So we are taking 7 damage now, and we are going very, very low. Well, where there's a will, there's a way, as they say. So we are playing Zelta Arcanum. We are playing 2 ground blockers, the Zelta Convoy. And we are playing Seed of Wisdom. And next turn, if we are able to ramp us up with Harmony of Flame, we can even play Shinra's Peaks. Okay, the opponent attacks with these 2. And do they attack with the 2-1? I don't remember right now. No. So this is a mistake, in my opinion at least. Because if they attacked with all of them, I would have to block, just chump block the 3/3 and block the 2-1 with the other one. Because right now, we can play Harmony of Flame, we can get up to 10, and the opponent saw that Shinra Speaks in our hand. Also, we have a unit that we can attack with now, and we can get another Sigil from our hand. We are dealing 2 damage to the enemy, so yeah, there is a ton of stuff going on here. Shinra Speaks, we do not need to decimate here. Just hope the opponent doesn't suddenly have a negate in hand. Well, they do not. And in a moment, we're going to draw 2 more cards, and we have a Defiance. And the opponent doesn't have anything solid in their hand. Okay, there's a ton of power here. So we could play Patriarch, we could play Roast. I opted to play Roast because it's a bigger unit. Next turn we are also getting Bren. Trailmaker, no, he's not a problem. So right now, yeah, we're getting Bren. We're attacking for 7. We're getting a power card. We're getting a +1 power this turn from Bren. We could play Patriarch to draw an additional card. And we have everything. We're playing Saudi, we're drawing a card end of turn. We have a negate in the form of a Display of Instinct. We have a Defiance. So the opponent got us down to 2. And then we were able to wait it out of the waters. I mean, if they played it slightly different and attacked with their 2-1 as well as their 3/3 and 2/2 flyer, then maybe we would have been in a much worse position. But yeah, them not attacking with everything was what allowed us to play a good Harmony of Flame, attack for an additional power card using the ability of Zelta, the passive ability of Zelta Arcanum, and allowed us to play Shinra Speaks, the 10 cost Shinra Speaks. Yes, even at 10, it is a good card. Okay, let's get on to game number 3 now. Hello and welcome. The opponent is playing an Ixtal, which means it's going to be a mirror match. Spoiler alert, yes, it is going to be a mirror match. The opponent, from what I gathered in this game, was playing an exact match to my deck. At least I have not seen, at least I don't remember seeing any cards that I was not playing in my own deck. I mean, Seed of Progress into Seek Power doesn't tell us much. Yet. Seed of Impulse, now I'm thinking the opponent is FTJ. The name of this combination we're gonna know quite soon, after set 8 releases finally. So it appears it's not the ancestor names. Anyway. A Fire Sigil. Yeah, it is rather slow. And right now, slow versus slow, Amber Acolyte. Let's get a power here. Also, we don't have second primal for Wisdom of the Elders. Even if I did have second primal for Wisdom of the Elders, I would have played Amber Acolyte first. And see, we played a unit which drew us a card. In this case, it was this card. The opponent had to use a removal for that as well. I mean, I don't know why I wouldn't be removing that, but still. The opponent also played a Primal Sigil, a Primal Source, which means, yeah, they're playing, even if they're not playing card for card, they're playing the same colors as we are. Seed of Order, they are 2 of everything. Yeah, sure. Go on in. As you can see, also, that Amber Acolyte into this Wisdom of the Elders is producing a ton of card advantage for us here. Now, the opponent is just bashing us for 3 a turn. That is not a very fast clock here, which means we don't have to Shenron Speaks on 5. We can just play an Age-Worn Vestige on turn 6 and we can just smack that unit. And this hand says that Caleb is Drunkj with power. Yes, this is going to take a while, guys. This is going to take a while. Just pause, get some popcorn. Yeah, the opponent is playing a 4/4 Endurance Flyer, which means this is as good time as any to play Shenron Speaks, because it is 2 for 1. I mean, they do have a card from their market in their hand, which could be, what, Sodi? Cleansing Rain? At this point, I was thinking Cleansing Rain, probably. Okay, Wisdom of the Elders, which means we could draw a card, or rather 2 cards. Hopefully no power cards anymore. The opponent has something fast, they might want to negate it. And they are negating it. But the opponent stopped playing power. We have 1 more power, we have 2 more cards in hand. That 6 life points difference doesn't mean anything right here. Forbidden Rider Outcast on the opponent is rather good. Remember, there are only 17 units in these decks. At least in my version of the deck. Which means, yeah, we'll be gaining some armor, probably. No sigils in hand. And 1 damage. Yeah, so we just attack for 3. We're not playing our Age-Worn Vestige. We're not in any hurry, probably. Not doing any rash moves is key here. Just slow and steady. Sure. Just play a power, pass the turn. Rime Conclave Smuggler number 2. I was looking at my market to see what the opponent could be getting here. Ah, it's one of my own Rime Conclave Smugglers. So at this point, I thought about just playing Age-Worn Vestige and doing a Harsh Roll and attacking the opponent face. And next turn, attacking something, and then Smuggler has Aegis and doing something like that. I could also just play Age-Worn Vestige without the Wrath to play Rime Conclave Smuggler on this turn. But I opted to Harsh Roll and hit the opponent for 3. I mean, for all I care, they could have a negate for this one as well. But then their unit also dies, which means it's even more of a card advantage for me. Yeah, they're playing Zelta Arcanum, getting 2 units probably, or drawing 2 cards, one or the other. Getting 2 units, sure. So what I can do now is what I said in the intro, which means attacking, playing Smuggler. I could get rid of a Defiance or a Power. I should have gotten rid of Primal Sigil, something that I can get back sooner or later. I could also just play Power and Rime Conclave Smuggler the Defiance away. I don't know why I kept it. And this game is going to be all about slow and steady. Sure. Maybe the opponent has the Display of Honor. I mean, they played 2 Smugglers already. Yeah, that's the Display of Honor, killing our Sodi, but that doesn't really matter. But what do we go for here? I think I want to smack the 2-2. Probably get Clutch of Talons now. I mean, the opponent is down to 1 card. If they Wrath, we still have the weapon. We still have Aegis units. So we might as well just get rid of this. Get Clutch of Talons, play a power. Make this a flyer, play 2 dragons. Because see, right now, even if they have Shenra's Peaks and they play it, they kill their own Sodi, they kill our 2 dragons, but we still have 8 attack worth of units. We still have Age-Worn Vestige that attacks them, and they still have a Curse of Loneliness on them, which pings them for 1 each turn. Even if they have an Age-Worn Vestige, that would still not be enough, at least for now. Alright, those were 3 games. Let's get back to the studio and talk about the deck some more. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the games and the video so far. So a couple more things about the deck and how it plays and what it plays. Right now, in my opinion, the flex slots in this deck are those 2 Kairos choices. But these are also pieces of removal that you could theoretically at least play on turn 2, especially if you have a seat into a Seek power, then probably you are able to play it unless it's Seat of Order. But the others have either Time or Fire, or Time and Fire. So yes, if you want to get rid of those Kairos choices, you can include probably more Scorpion Wasps. I mean, I've taken a couple out to make room for those Kairos choices, and those choices have been rather good. But you also might have seen that Scorpion Wasps were rather good in these playthroughs. I wouldn't get rid of those Displays of Instincts, though, as they really overperform, because they can target sides, they can negate spells, I mean, a ton of stuff. Another thing that I probably already said, but I wanted to reiterate. This deck is running 4 copies of Defiance and 4 copies of Permafrost. These cards are not perfect against all decks. They are very, very, very good against very fast decks like Combrai, and you really need them to stay on point and to be able to win against them. But against control decks, against other mid-range decks, etc., they are really not that necessary. I mean, you can just take them out to the market with Rime Conclave Smuggler. Permafrost, you can do on 1 turn. You can permafreeze an enemy and then play Archgriffin Patriarch just to redraw this Permafrost. You can usually use Defiance just to stun an enemy attacking unit. For example, if it got Killer off of something, off of a Xenon Temple, something like that, that also works. But yes, versus control, these are maybe not dead cards, but it is really difficult to use them very well. So those Defiances are the first things to go usually to the market, especially in something like a mirror match. But also a Defiance can get rid of, when you're playing against Argentport, it can get rid of a Fenris Nightshade if the opponent is brave enough to attack into you, and not just hold it back and press the Fenris button and deal self-face damage all the time for some card advantage that is really not going to be enough against this deck. Anyway, this is going to be it for this deck. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I know that the format is getting a small changeover in a couple of days when Direwolf introduces 75, give or take, cards from set 8, commons and uncommons, into the draft format. That might mean that maybe there's a Fire Time Justice display or a Time Justice Primal display that we might want to play in this deck, either main deck or in the market. It also might mean we are getting some more tokens that might be good for this deck, but I think seats are still better. Also, I'm not running any ancient manuals, whether you've seen it or not. I mean, this power base stood its own in 19 games. I mean, in 17 out of 19 games, so that stands for something. Anyway, once again, thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. And remember, if you did, click on subscribe. It's a small gesture of appreciation that I really appreciate. Okay, see you guys next week.